Hello and welcome back to another episode of Transport Fever 2. We're here in the farms that we put up in the last video, and in this video we're going to provide some updates to this entire food production line, and then after we get that done we'll be over near our city of Allentown to start producing some construction materials. And so starting off with this food line, after doing some testing off camera and having a bunch of recommendations from the comments, we're going to pretty much redo how we're supplying food and moving grain around, as this line isn't necessarily profitable, especially the long trip to Portland with the food trucks. It's just not really feasible. So instead what we're going to do is move this grain from the farms to a port somewhere along this coast, but relatively close to Portland, where then we'll ship the grain up the river to this food processing plant. Then after dropping off the grain, it'll pick up some more food and then bring it all the way back over, drop it off here, where then the food can be sent right into Portland, and we eliminate the necessity for dozens of trucks along this road, and hopefully it will increase our profit margins by quite a bit. And so I think we're going to start by trying to get a port in this area. So let's see if we're able to build one just off the road. It looks like we'll need to probably move the river a little bit closer, but that's a lot of terraforming that we'll have to do. So I think maybe we'll move it a little closer to this corner where it'll be a little bit less moving land in order to get this to fit. And so we'll get this placed right in here, and this fits in quite nicely. We'll have to smooth out a bit of the landscaping. We don't want to go too hard on this at the moment, just because we do need to be very conscious of our money. So really this might be all that we do until we can start bringing some more money in through this route. But we'll just quickly touch it up a bit, and then now we can grab a truck stop, since we'll need trucks to bring in food or bring in grain and then take the food over to Portland. And so we'll get this tucked in right next to this port. We can now adjust these lines so we can get rid of that stop, and we'll bring in this one. And so we'll specify, because this is our food line, to load food. And then also along with that, we can get rid of over half of these vehicles. So we'll probably start around 20 and see what rate that gets us. And that gets us to a rate of 85, which still seems a little big. So we'll sell 5 more of those vehicles. Brings us down to a rate of 64, which if we come over to Portland, should be pretty good for the moment, and we can expand once this line is set up. And then the other adjustment we're going to make is from this farm, instead of going from this one all the way over to the food processing plant, we're going to have it come from this farm just down the road to this port. So we can then get rid of both of those stations, connect this one, bring it over to here, and then we'll set our loading and unloading criteria, and that should be our trucks pretty much set up. And so we can also sell a couple of these trucks. We want to get the rate, I guess we'll get the rate to about 200, which is what this farm is currently producing at. And it looks like 39 vehicles will get us pretty much there. We'll have to keep an eye on how busy this road gets. With 39 vehicles, that might get to be a lot, but now the last thing we need to do is buy a couple of boats, and those will then go from the food processing plant over to Portland. And so I think we'll go with these boats, as they're the fastest ones we have right now, and over such a long distance, an increase of 2 miles an hour does add up over time. So we'll start out with 8 of these boats, and we'll set those up on our new line from this port over to this port. And so this line is what's going to be making us the most money out of everything, because it's going to be taking the grain that it has over to the food processing plant, where then it'll pick up food and bring it back. So we'll want to make sure this is set up properly. So over at the food processing plant, it picks up food, and then once it gets to the food processing plant, it unloads the grain. So this will be carrying resources back and forth both ways. It won't be carrying quite as much back since food is at about half as much as the grain, since it takes 2 grain to make 1 food. So it will be at best coming back half full, but that's better than it coming back empty. And so we should be able to let this play out, and I'll let this play as our vehicles spread out on their lines. We'll spread out the boats, and hopefully we'll come back once things are starting to turn a profit. Now real quick, while we're waiting for things to switch around, let's check our rate on our boats, and this is estimated to be at about 166. Let's just get that up as close to 200 as possible to start out with. Looks like maybe one more boat, and that'll be just fine. So we'll do that, and then now we can wait and see how this all works out. Alright, and so we're finally making a profit off of these lines. If we just come into our line manager and take a look here, the one coming from our farm is making us a good amount of money and has been for a little bit. We've even ramped up the amount of vehicles on it so we can push out just a bit more food and get a little bit more money from our ship lines. If we take a look at this line, our primary earner here, you can see this has been making us quite a bit of money for a little bit now. It did take quite a while for things to turn around, since boats do take a long time to move, and we sort of had to wait for the return trip as well for things to finally start flowing. And then lastly, our food line, taking a look here, this is also earning us a profit, although not much. It is still getting us there. And then over on the flip side of things, we have this boat line here. This one actually hasn't been earning us too much money, but ever since we started increasing the amount of grain that we're bringing to the food processing plant, you can see here it is starting to earn us money. And even over here in Salt Lake City, these lines are earning us money, and in fact they could probably use a few more trucks, if anything. So this is just a rate of 33, and I believe our boat is moving things at a rate of 71 if it was fully loaded. So I think we'll try to bring this up a little bit more. So if we take a look at the line details, if we can get this rate up to 55, I think is a good number for right now. And so leaving off this area, I think in the future, once we get larger trucks that can carry larger amounts of resources, it'll probably make more sense to truck directly from these 2 farms over to the food processing plant. That way our boats on the return trip can also come back with a full load of food. So that's just things to look out for in the future when using trucks is more profitable, since these horses are so slow and they carry so little that doing just a point-to-point route like this is hardly ever profitable unless you get the balance just right. And so next, the main area we're going to look at is Allentown and supplying it with construction materials. So I think we have this nice little area over here where we could probably place a quarry. I'm going to guess maybe in this little pocket would look good, where then we'll probably then truck it over to a construction materials plant. Maybe we'll move this one down this way a little bit, just so it's a little bit closer to the water and on a little bit more even ground where we can detail it a bit better. And then I think in order to make us money, we'll have to figure out how we're going to be efficient with this route and getting the construction materials over to Allentown. So maybe we end up with a port over here, so then our trucks can bring the stone over to the construction materials plant, bring it over to a port somewhere in this area, and then come back just so that more of its trip is spent carrying resources instead of traveling empty. And so we'll get started with this by placing our quarry right here. We're not really going to do much detailing at the moment. We're going to get the line set up so we can, first of all, see if it's going to make us money, and then if it does make us money, we will come back and detail everything through here. So let's get our harbors set up, and I think we'll get one right around here somewhere. So just like this. And then we can get this one placed just outside of Allentown, right about here. Alright, and so now that we have all of our sort of connections placed, let's connect them up by roads. So we'll want to bring this around, and we're going to be pretty conscious with our money and sort of build as we earn it, since we are operating pretty close to zero. And so we're going to have to pretty much follow the terrain very closely and build in very short segments in order to get this to work. We'll also want to sort of go as straight of a line as possible over to this construction materials plant so that our truck lines are profitable. Alright, so our road connections are now made between each of these areas. We had to really work our way through the terrain to make this as cheap as possible, which is why you see so many of these little curves here. And unfortunately, we did have to build a little bit of a tunnel, but I think this tunnel will definitely make its money back in terms of time saved along this trip. So next, we'll need to get some truck stations in here. And again, we're going to want these as cheap as possible. So we'll get one placed in here somewhere. So we'll pretty much just get this here if we can get the money just right. And then we'll get another one here. And then this one all the way out here can just be an unload stop for now. Since really we're just unloading the construction materials and then coming back to the quarry. And now as for our other port, this will need to be a truck stop, so we'll rotate this around. We'll get this placed just like that, and then inside the city I think we'll just drop them off right here in sort of the heart of where all the construction materials need to go. And so we also need a truck depot, so we'll get this placed there, and we can start to set up these lines. And so after waiting for some time to pass, we'll order some trucks and set them up on their new line. So again, as mentioned before, this is pretty much just going to be a triangle route. So 2/3 of the line, the trucks will be moving resources at full capacity, and then the 1/3 will be the return trip back to the quarry. So let's set this up just so things don't get confused once our lines get more complex later on. So we'll unload the stone, load the construction materials, and then of course the one at the port is a unload stop, so we don't need to do anything there. And then of course next we'll need a shipyard, since it is a little bit far away for us to use the other shipyard that we have. So we'll get this placed right about here, and then while we're at it, let's place a road depot somewhere in this area as well for our Allentown construction materials line. And so next we'll buy the boat while we have the money, and I think we can go with this one since it's slightly cheaper running costs and it's such a short distance, the top speed's not going to matter too much. We'll just get one of these, and I think this will pretty much dictate what our rate is going to be moving through here. But now that we've done that, We can then purchase just a few of these. We'll start out with maybe 10 trucks, or we might have to go down to 8 so we can afford it. And then those will go from here into the city of Allentown. Alright, so now that our line is set up and things are initially looking promising, we are low on money just because I've been sort of equalizing the rates across all of our lines here, but it does seem like we are making money on each leg of this trip, so I'll continue to keep an eye on that. But while we wait for things to fully shake out along this line, let's get in and start detailing all of our points. So our ports, our construction material plant, and then our quarry, and we'll be back once all of those are done. Alright, and so this is pretty much all that we're going to do. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to detail up the quarry as much as I really wanted to. Doing something like this with the quarries, coal mines, and other industries like that is a lot of terraforming, and especially in this location. You saw probably for a little bit I wanted to add another industry up here, but it looks like with the terrain changes and everything, it would be close to 2 million to get that in there. So we have it set up for the future for expansion and further detailing, but I think for now this works okay. So this will sort of be one level, and then we'll come up here, have another industry in here, and then we can detail all this up and make it look good. But I think this is a strong start. Then coming over to our construction material plant, we added this little bit over here just to sort of add a little bit of expansion around this. I think real quick while we're here, we can clean up all these little connection points. So we'll just come through with our dirt brush, hold shift, and then paint over those. And now that looks much cleaner in this area. And then over here, the 2 ports, we didn't really do too much with other than just adding a few roads and making it look a little bit more cohesive. Same thing over here. But I think these are really well tied together, and they're pretty much ready for expansion whenever we sort of increase throughput through this area. And so there's been more than enough time for these lines to sort of go back and forth, get established, and sort of in a rhythm. So let's take a quick look and see how those are doing. Starting off with our line here, if we take a look at these finances, it seems to be currently alternating between doing really well and then sort of breaking even. I think that's because there's a gap somewhere along here. I think it's over here. So there's a few vehicles that aren't sort of perfectly timed across this whole route, but that's fine. This all sort of evens out in the end. So it is good to see that this is making us a good amount of money, especially when it is good. It's making us about 200,000 extra during those periods. And then coming into our boat line, this one I've checked up on quite often. This one seems to be pretty hit or miss as well, and also seems to coincide with the sort of gap in vehicles as that comes through. But as you can see, when it does go full, it really makes us a good amount of money, almost doubles the amount that it costs. So there is promise there, and I think overall it evens out to a little bit of a profit. So I'm okay leaving that for now, but obviously there's some fine tuning in here with vehicle spacing and other things. And then lastly, this line over here, which has been having no problems earning money, although it's not much. It is money, so we'll take it. And I think there might even be opportunity to increase the amount of vehicles just a little bit. If we come back here and take a look at what this is operating at, a rate of 112, and then double checking that with our ship at 108, I think we can probably get this running at about the same rate. I'm not going to overdo it, but we will probably get 4 more vehicles, maybe 2 more on top of that, and I'm pretty happy with this rate of 88. And then we can come over to our city of Allentown and see how it's responding to these new construction materials. You see it has expanded out a good bit. It's extended the grid in some areas, which we will come back and fix some of these before it turns into a mess. But we can see we're supplying just over half of the construction materials required in this city, and that is very much boosting growth. If we take a look at the chart here, you can see when that first started, and the city has doubled, if not tripled, in size since then. And now I also want to come back over here and take a look and see how things are going on this end of our map. This line seems to be very steady, earning us quite a profit. Let's check our boats. These boats also seem to have settled into a pretty good rhythm across the board. And then lastly, we have our food going into Portland, pretty much doing the same over in Allentown, making a small profit, but it is consistent. Now, one thing I am noticing is that our food is overflowing here at this truck stop, so anytime it goes over 60, it's actually sort of slowly dumping that off because I guess it goes bad or whatever. So we're going to need to probably bump up the rate of our trucks coming into Portland. And if we take a look here, we're supplying about 2/3 of what the city needs. So that upper end was at like 99. And I think we can grab this, get probably another 4 more vehicles. 81 seems okay. Let's get maybe 1 more. Although we don't have money, so I'm okay leaving it like this. 82 is a good number, and hopefully we'll start to see that coming out of this. And then over on the Salt Lake City end of things, this boat seems to be doing just fine now. Now that it's able to actually get all the food it needs, as well as this line that brings the food into the city, that is also doing quite well. However, this seems to be running into the same issue that Portland was, so let's maybe grab 4 more vehicles on that, and we'll see what rate that's functioning at. 75 coming into the city, 86, so I think that's a good number there to leave that with. And so what's exciting about this whole line is now that we know it's making a profit and there's definitely room to grow, we can pretty much just scale up this whole operation whenever we want, and we'd probably get that same amount of money reciprocated back to us. So we would obviously need a place to transport it to, and there's not really a good spot at the moment. We do have Lowell up here with some food that it needs, but that's a pretty far boat trip, and I doubt that it would make any money. We would sort of need to trade goods between the two cities, so maybe if we ever get something producing up in this area, we could have food come up this way and then some resource come back on the return trip, but that doesn't seem really feasible at the moment. And so I think I'll let this all go and just do its thing while we slowly start to build up our money from all the money that we spent detailing and adding vehicles and other stuff up by Allentown. But to finish off this episode, I think we're going to go through all of these cities, or at least the ones that we're connected to, and just make sure that the city is growing how we want it to. Make sure we don't get stuck with any unnecessary intersections or roads that are curved when we're in grids and other things like that. So let's start here in our city of Portland, and immediately let's pause so the city doesn't sort of get in our way while we're doing this. We have this road here, which is a pain, although it seems like this is going to be a very expensive operation fixing these roads. But just for now, we'll get this road placed, and I think that's good enough for Portland. And so next we'll come over to Allentown, since Allentown's not quite as messed up as Salt Lake City is, so it's going to be a lot cheaper for us to come through and fix some of these roads. So we'll just pretty much finish off the grids that it started. This looks about good. And then this street we'll get rid of. Hopefully it doesn't build it right back. Hopefully it builds it here or here to extend this grid. And then we have this connection up here, which I don't think it leads to another city. Not that anyone would really be doing that right now, but I think we're going to delete this and pull this connection back quite a bit to allow the city to fill in this grid a bit more. And then whenever we get the money, we can then delete this little spike that the city has tried to build. But I suppose that this is a good lesson for the future, that we'll need to make sure that we're building out our cities before we go supplying them with resources, so that they fill in the streets that we build instead of us coming through and sort of pruning the cities ourselves. And so lastly, we'll finish up here in Salt Lake City, and we'll try to do what we can, although it's going to be really hard to delete these two streets. It'll be over $1 million, but what we will be able to is just extend these grids whenever we get the money, and then we'll be good to pretty much end off this episode. Alright, so now we pretty much did the best that we could here in Salt Lake City without blowing a ton of money, but I think this will be good enough for the city to take off with, and I think that's pretty much going to be it. And so to finish off this video, we're going to go back and take a look at everything that we've done so far in this video, and then when we come back, we'll talk about some of our potential future projects. And so thinking about things that we want to do in the future, I think definitely getting this construction materials plant and this whole area sort of more efficient and I guess more product flowing through it. So obviously getting a second quarry is a goal for here, and then as Allentown grows, supplying that with more construction materials. I don't think there's any city nearby that we could easily get to that needs construction materials, so unfortunately we'll just be supplying Allentown for now. I'm not sure if there's any other production lines that we could easily grab across the map here, just scanning through. If you guys see something, leave it in the comments, or if there's just a line you want me to set up somewhere, I'm sure we can do that, but I don't think I really see any other super easy lines to set up for these cities. So whatever we do next is definitely going to be a little bit of a challenge, and I'm more than open to recommendations by you guys. And so with that, that's going to be all for this video. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.